The waking state is the one in which we see this world. It is supposed that in this world there is a multitude of finite selves, to all of whom this world is common. We suppose also that this world is an objective reality with which we come into contact through the gateways which are our senses. These are open only in this waking state. In seeking to persuade ourselves that the world is real, we forget that the body and the senses are part of the world appearance. And so forgetting, we assume that these are real in the first place. Having thus surreptitiously assumed what is unproved, we naturally find it very easy to prove the truth of the rest of the world by the interested testimony of the senses. The judge who gives a decision on this point, namely the intellect, is incompetent, being the offspring of the ego, which is the father of all lies. The ancient revelation tells us that the waking self is not really a finite being, as the intellect makes him out to be. The self is not restricted to a particular body. His body is the whole universe, the whole of creation, and is called Vashvanara, or Vishva, the all-man. The sage of Arunachala tells us that this world of waking is one indivisible whole, so that we should either take the whole as ourselves, if we can, or renounce the whole as an illusion. In his actual words, the sage Bhagavan said, "Since every single body in the world is made up of 5 sheaths, all the 5 sheaths together answer to the name of body. Such being the case, how can the world exist apart from the body? Is the world ever seen by anyone without a body?" Here the sage reminds us of a fact that we are, as a rule, tend to ignore, but it is a fact that we cannot deny. When one sees the world, he sees also a body of his own. This is the case both in waking and in dream. The body and the world are inseparable co-appearances. When there is no world appearance, neither is there a body. The sage asks us here, if the world were something having a distinct existence apart from the body, why does not the world appear to us in sleep when we are bodiless? This question is unanswerable. The fact is that the world has no existence apart from the body. So the whole world is our body, a creation and projection of the ego mind, just as it is in dreams. The objection may be raised that being bodiless in dreams, we still see a world of some sort. The dreamer's body lies inert on his bed, but still there appears to him a world of variety, similar to the waking world. Also, when one dies and goes away, leaving his physical body to be burnt or buried, he is bodiless, but is able to travel to another world and dwell there for some time before taking birth in this world again. And while he dwells in that other world, he must be seeing that world. To this, the answer is that the word body does not mean only this body of flesh, but also others of a finer texture. This is the teaching of the sacred lore, which the sage accepts and gives as the answer to these questions. There are 5 bodies, or rather 5 sheaths, covering the indwelling Atman, or the self, and concealing it. All these put together make up the body, and hence so long as one or more of these sheaths are left, the self is not bodiless, and hence can see a world corresponding to the remaining sheaths. When one dreams, the subtle or mental body is left to the ego, and it is this subtle body that expands and becomes the dream world. In a similar way, with the passenger to another world, He travels in his subtle body, which enables him to hold commerce with that other world. Of course, that world is the creation of his mind. Hence, in every case where a world is seen, there is also a body for the ego. Thus, it has been rightly said that body and world are always seen together, that they are one single, indivisible appearance is unquestionably true. We have already seen that the waking world is substantially similar to the world seen in dreams. That the latter are unreal, few would deny. Those that deny this need not be taken seriously. They are driven to this absurd position by the exigencies of a defective creed. We came to the conclusion that both waking and dream are dreams. What we call waking is not true waking. The true waking is the egoless state, the natural state, which is the waking from the sleep of ignorance, in which this dream called waking takes place. In that waking, no falsehoods can appear. Now we shall take up the question of the continuity of the self, or Atman. The question relates to the state of deep sleep, since it is only in relation to it that a doubt may be raised at all, there being no body, nor mind or ego in dreamless sleep. The common man does not question the continuity of the self through sleep, on to the next waking. Of course, he is unaware that the sleeping self is not the finite, ego-wrapped self of waking and dream. As the sage has said, no man says, I did not exist in sleep. It is so sophisticated humanity alone that is troubled by doubts about the continuity of self-existence. But all the sages are emphatic that the self underlies all the three states and gives reasons to help us to understand it. In the first place, we are mistaken in our supposition that dreamless sleep is empty of all consciousness. When this question was raised by someone, the sage said, "You say so after waking from sleep. You do not do so in sleep itself. That in you which now says that sleep is unconsciousness is your mind. But it was not present in your sleep, so it is natural for the mind to be ignorant of the consciousness there is in sleep. And not having experienced sleep, it is unable to remember what it was like and makes mistakes about it. The state of deep sleep is beyond the mind." This shows that it is unfair for us to judge of any one state with the mind of another state. The waking mind cannot judge sleep for the reason given by the sage. A correct valuation of the three states is possible only to the sage who has transcended all of them. In the second place, there is sufficient proof of the survival of the self in deep sleep. This we can understand from the following dialogue in which the sage answered a series of questions. A Western visitor asked a very wide question concerning the practical utility of the egoless state. And in the course of the talk that ensued, he raised the question of the reality of the world. When he was told that the world appears discontinuously, he sought to meet it by the argument that the world does appear all the time to someone or other who is awake at the time. And the sage showed that the argument is inconclusive, as already shown. Then the sage proceeded to say, "You take the world to be real because it is a creation of your own mind, as in your dream. You do not see it in sleep because then it is wound up and merged in the self, together with the ego and the mind. and exists in seed form in your sleep. On waking, the ego arises, identifying itself with a body, and at the same time sees the world. Your waking world is a creation of your mind, just like your dream world. There must be someone that sees the world, both in waking and in dream. Who is he? Is he the body? No. Is he the mind? It must be so. But you cannot be the mind since you exist in sleep when there is no mind. But I do not know that. Perhaps I cease to exist then. If that is the case, then how do you recollect what was experienced yesterday? Do you seriously contend that there was a break of continuity of yourself? Yes, it is possible. If so, then Johnson going to sleep may awake as Benson. But this does not happen. How do you explain your sense of the persistence of your identity? You say, I slept and I woke, implying that you are the same as the one that lay down to sleep. The questioner had no answer, and so the sage continued. When you awake from sleep, you say, I slept happily and feel refreshed. So sleep was your experience. And he that remembers the happiness of sleep, saying, I slept happily, cannot be other than the one that experienced that happiness. The two are one and the same. At this point, the questioner agreed that it must be so. Thus, we have ample proof that there is a continuing self of some sort in sleep. The self is not the soul, but the real self of the Upanishads is what we learn from the sages. From our experience of sleep, we learn also that the true self can exist without the body and the mind. There being no body of any kind in sleep, there is no ego sense in it. Sleep is in fact very similar to the egoless state. We shall see later that there is an important distinction, but here we need to notice only that the absence of individuality and of the mind in sleep is not inimical to happiness being enjoyed in it and remembered on waking. According to Revelation, the happiness of sleep is due just to its egolessness, imperfect as it is. The three states are kept distinct from the egoless one by the persistence of bodies or sheaths which veil the self and limit it. The three bodies are spoken of, and 5 sheaths. The physical or gross body corresponds to the state of waking. The mental or subtle body is related to dreams. It is also the body by which one goes to and dwells in other worlds, such as heaven or hell. There is also another body called the causal body, which is the only body that is left over in sleep. This body is nothing but ignorance, the ego and mind in seed form. The 5 sheaths are the same as these 3 bodies. The gross body is the same as the Anandamaya sheath. The subtle body is called the Pranamaya sheath, and also the Manomaya sheath, and the Vijnanamaya sheath. The causal body is the same as the Anandamaya sheath. The 3 sheaths comprised in the subtle body are named as above, according to their functions. The Pranamaya has the function of life, the Manomaya of sensations and thoughts, and the Vijnanamaya of intellect and decision-making. The Anandamaya is not to be confounded with Ananda, or true bliss, which is the real self in the egoless state, when it is not veiled by bodies or sheaths. The sage tells us that the last sheath is only hypothetical, invented for the purposes of teaching. Anyhow, that sheath is of no use for the seeker of the self. It has to be jumped, as we shall see later. The sheaths or bodies are of course not to be taken as real. The experience of the self, which is usually termed right knowledge, is just the realization of the non-existence of all the things that are non-existent, but which seem to be existing by virtue of the ego sense. Hence, right knowledge is nothing but the falling off of these sheaths. What remains over afterwards is that which is real, the pure, infinite consciousness, the Atman, or the Self. We shall now see what we can learn about that Self from the sage's revelation.